I never thought a single morning could unravel everything I had taken for granted. The sunlight poured through the half-open blinds, painting stripes across the apartment floor, and yet nothing felt bright. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a sharp, insistent vibration that I somehow already knew carried bad news. I picked it up, and there it was, her message, short, clipped, and merciless. I'm done. The apartment is mine. You can't do anything without me. I froze. The words didn't just sting, they landed like stones in the pit of my stomach. I read them over and over, as though repetition could somehow dilute their meaning, as though, if I stared at the screen long enough, they might rearrange themselves into something less final. But no, every letter was deliberate. Every sentence a nail sealing the coffin of what I thought we had. I laughed. Not the kind of laugh that expresses humor, but a hollow, almost instinctive response that kept me from crying right there on the cold kitchen floor. Maybe, I whispered to myself, echoing the word I would eventually text back, not because I had a plan yet, but because I wanted to remind myself I wasn't defeated. Not completely. She had always been meticulous, always thinking 5 steps ahead. In many ways, that's what drew me to her in the first place, the way her mind moved like a well-oiled machine, anticipating obstacles before they existed. But now, that meticulousness was pointed directly at me, weaponized. She had assumed I couldn't fight back, assumed that because I lacked the resources she did, lawyers, leverage, connections, I would simply fold. I spent the next hour pacing the apartment, staring at the walls we had painted together, the pictures of trips we had taken, and the small tokens of our life. Each one felt like a betrayal. Each one reminded me of promises made and trust broken. And yet, beneath the anger and the hurt, there was that stubborn flicker of defiance. She had underestimated me. That, above all, fueled a slow, deliberate calm that settled over me like a cloak. I remember calling my best friend first, trying to keep my voice steady. She's serious, I said, trying not to let the tremor show. She's taking the apartment. She's done. He listened, silent for a moment. And then he said the thing that snapped the last thread of despair I had been hanging on to. You think you can't, but sometimes it's not about money or lawyers. Sometimes it's about who you know. And that's when it hit me. I had someone in my corner I hadn't even considered, a person who could change everything. Someone who knew the stakes, someone whose presence alone could tilt the balance. I didn't have to fight her on her terms. I could bring in a player she had never imagined. But first, I had to endure the next few days. The texts, the calls, the thinly veiled threats. Each one was designed to provoke fear, to make me feel powerless, and for a moment, it worked. I questioned every choice I had made, every word I had spoken, every time I had trusted her. The apartment, the physical manifestation of our shared life, was now a battleground, and I had no army, or so she thought. Sleep became impossible. I spent nights revisiting memories, trying to separate fact from emotion. The laughter we shared, the whispered promises in the dark, the quiet mornings with coffee and shared smiles, they all existed, but in this new reality, they felt almost alien. Could someone so intimately familiar suddenly become a stranger capable of such calculated cruelty? The answer was yes, I realized, and it was terrifying. Then, on the 4th day after her ultimatum, my phone buzzed again. A text, but this one wasn't from her. It was from someone whose reputation alone made my pulse quicken, the most notorious negotiator in the city, a person whose skills were legendary, whose presence in any room commanded attention, and whose loyalty, if given, was absolute. "I hear you might need help," the message read. I stared at it for a long time, heart hammering. My mind raced, the pieces falling into place. She had thought she controlled the narrative. She had assumed I would crumble. But now I had the leverage. Not through money, not through threats, but through alliances. Through a presence that could turn the tide without ever raising a hand. The next step was simple in theory, terrifying in practice. Invite the negotiator to meet me. Let them see the apartment. Let them understand the stakes. The city's most feared strategist sitting beside me would be more than intimidation, it would be a declaration. The game had changed, and so I waited. For the knock at the door, for the sound of footsteps that would announce a shift in power, for the moment when her assumptions would shatter, when the air of control she had exuded would finally crack. It was coming. The knock came just as the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, anxious shadows across the apartment. My heart skipped a beat, a mix of anticipation and fear twisting inside me. I opened the door to find Himtal, impeccably dressed, eyes sharp with intelligence that seemed to pierce straight through the air between us. The negotiator, the person I had summoned, the city's most notorious strategist, was standing there like he had always been meant to be part of this story. "Ready?" he asked, a subtle smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He didn't wait for an answer. He walked in, surveying the apartment with an almost predatory calm, as if he could read its walls, its history, and even the tension lingering in the air. I could barely speak. She'll be here soon," I managed. He nodded, as though this was the most natural thing in the world. "Good. Let's make sure she remembers exactly who underestimated whom." Moments later, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, my palms sweating, my chest tight. This was at the confrontation, the moment where everything hung in the balance. I opened the door, and there she stood, poised, confident, certain of victory. But she froze when she saw him. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the room, landing on him, and then flicking to me with a mixture of confusion and outrage. Who is this?" she demanded, trying to regain control, to mask the tremor in her voice. He smiled, a calm, almost disarming expression, and simply said, "She doesn't need to worry. I'm her childhood friend." Time seemed to slow. I watched her reaction carefully, noting every micro-expression, every subtle shift in her posture. Her confidence wavered, just slightly, enough to see cracks in the armor she had built around herself. She had assumed that I was alone, that I had no resources, no allies, no backup. She hadn't counted on this. The tension in the room was almost tangible, like static electricity before a storm. Every word, every glance carried weight. The negotiator didn't speak again for several long moments, letting her stew in her uncertainty, letting her realize that the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Finally, she spoke, her voice sharper, defensive. "You think bringing him here changes anything? You still can't fight me." He tilted his head slightly, a faint smile playing across his lips. "Fighting isn't always about aggression. Sometimes it's about strategy. And you, my dear, are simply unprepared for what's coming." I felt a surge of hope, a renewed confidence building inside me. The apartment, once a symbol of defeat, now felt like neutral ground. a chessboard where the first move had already been calculated, and the next few moves were mine to orchestrate. She tried to assert control, pacing the living room, words flowing faster now, a torrent of claims and accusations, each designed to intimidate, to assert dominance. But he stayed calm, measured, responding not with anger but with precision, dismantling her arguments one by one without raising his voice, without ever appearing forceful. It was mesmerizing to watch. I had never realized how powerful presence could be, how simply having the right person beside you could alter the course of a confrontation. Her eyes darted between us, and for the first time, I saw genuine uncertainty. She had expected submission. She had expected fear. Instead, she faced a wall of calculated calm, of unwavering confidence that didn't even originate from me, but radiated from the man standing silently next to me. Hours passed. At least it felt that way. The negotiation, the unspoken battle, continued in subtle ways through choice of words, through pauses, through glances that carried threats and promises alike. And slowly, inch by inch, the tide began to turn. Her rigid certainty gave way to hesitation, her carefully constructed narrative, unraveling under the weight of strategy and presence she hadn't anticipated by the end of the night. When she finally left the apartment, there was no dramatic explosion, no yelling, no shouts, just a quiet retreat, a recognition that the balance of power had shifted, and that perhaps she had underestimated the one she had once believed powerless. I closed the door behind her, exhaling a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. Turning to the negotiator, I couldn't help but grin, a mix of relief and exhilaration coursing through me. "I don't know how to thank you," he shrugged lightly, almost casually, but there was a glint in his eyes that made it clear he understood the gravity of what had just transpired. "You did your part. You reached out. That's often the hardest step. The rest is simply playing the game right." I sank onto the couch, the weight of the past week slowly lifting. The apartment, once a battleground of despair, now felt like a reclaimed space, a testament to patience, strategy, and the unexpected allies who can appear just when you need them most. That night, as I lay in the quiet apartment, I realized something profound. Love, trust, and loyalty aren't just about the people you cherish there, about the alliances you form, the support you allow yourself to accept, and the courage to face what seems insurmountable. And sometimes, the most dramatic battles are fought not with fists, but with presence, wit, and unwavering calm. The days that followed were unlike anything I had imagined. The apartment, once a silent battlefield of tension and resentment, began to feel alive again. Every corner held the faint echo of our previous conflict, yet now each shadow seemed softened by possibility rather than threat. I had survived the storm, yes, but more importantly, I had learned something essential about love, power, and resilience. It started with small victories, simple routines, making coffee in the morning, hearing the hum of the city outside the window, seeing the light shift across the walls, felt imbued with a new sense of ownership. The apartment was still ours, and yet it wasn't just about possession anymore. It was about the knowledge that I could navigate chaos, confront fear, and emerge not only intact but stronger. And then came the calls. Friends and acquaintances, those who had witnessed snippets of our previous turmoil, reached out, some to offer support, others to express surprise. The story had already begun to ripple beyond our walls. Yet the most profound message came from her. though it arrived in the form of silence rather than words. In the quiet, I realized that confrontation had changed more than the external circumstances. It had shifted the internal landscape as well. I wasn't the same person who had been blindsided by her ultimatum. I wasn't someone who would crumble under pressure or cower in fear. The lessons were ingrained, almost physical in their permanence. And with those lessons came clarity, the kind of clarity that allows one to see a relationship, not just for the moments of love and intimacy, but for the truths that lie beneath the values, the boundaries, and the respect each partner owes to the other. Weeks later, she returned, not with confrontation this time, but with a tentative attempt at dialogue. I remember the first moment I saw her standing at the doorway, the city lights casting her shadow long across the floor. Our eyes met, and there was no anger, no accusation, just a fragile, uncertain curiosity. "Can we talk?" she asked softly, almost like she was testing the waters of our renewed reality. I nodded, gesturing for her to sit. The air was thick with unspoken words, but I had learned patience. I had learned to listen, to measure, and to understand that some battles are best won not with haste, but with time and thought. We spoke for hours, about the past, about the choices that led us here, about the moments of love and the mistakes we had made. The conversation was raw, honest, and at times painful, but it was also liberating. For the first time, we were communicating without pretense, without manipulation, without the weight of assumption. We were seeing each other as we truly were, flawed human, but capable of growth. And then came the decision, unspoken yet understood. We wouldn't return to the patterns that had nearly destroyed us. The apartment remained mine, a symbol not of victory over her, but of resilience and the capacity to reclaim one's life. She left that night with a promise not of reconciliation, not of immediate forgiveness, but of respect for boundaries and acknowledgement of mutual growth. I watched her walk away, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The city lights reflected off the streets, flickering like stars, reminding me that life continues, that challenges pass, and that every ending contains the seed of a new beginning. In the weeks and months that followed, I grew in ways I hadn't anticipated. The apartment became a sanctuary, yes, but also a reminder of the lessons learned, the necessity of alliances, the power of presence, the importance of strategy, and above all, the enduring strength of self. I rebuilt routines, rekindled friendships, and even explored new connections, approaching life with a sense of clarity and purpose that had once seemed impossible. And though the scars of the past lingered, they no longer dictated my present. Instead, they became markers of growth, of battles fought and lessons earned. Love, I realized, is not only about the warmth of companionship, but also about the courage to confront betrayal, the wisdom to navigate conflict, and the resilience to emerge stronger, wiser, and more grounded. In the end, the apartment wasn't just a space to live, it was a testament to the power of strategy, the value of unexpected allies, and the unyielding strength that lies within when one refuses to surrender. And while our paths may diverge, the story of that confrontation, the lesson of presence, patience, and calculated courage would remain with me, shaping not just my understanding of love, but my understanding of myself. As I settled into the quiet, the city humming outside like a living heartbeat, I realized that life is not about avoiding storms, but about learning how to navigate them. And when you find the right allies, the right strategy, and the courage to stand firm, Even the fiercest tempest cannot undo the strength you have earned.